The internet changed how we work. AI is changing what work gets done. A bank cut loan processing from days to hours. A student built an AI scheduler, improving on-time delivery from under 70% to over 90%. Most teams know AI matters, but aren't sure where to start. InAI is Indiana's statewide AI adoption effort, built with industry, academia, and community partners, helping you move from understanding to action. Visit inaiready.com.
I tell kids, if you don't remember anything else from this story, remember this. Nobody can tell you no who doesn't make the decision. You still need to try.
You got to raise your hand. And it's okay that they chose you because you're Latino. That doesn't mean anything. It's an opportunity, So open the door and take it. Run with it.
If you don't have diverse people, that's women, that's people of color, that's LGBTQ+, if you don't have that representation in your leadership, then you're doing your organization a disservice, because there's no way you can understand what the challenges are and how to combat them.
Those voices span the first 5 years of IBJ's The Freedom Forum with Angela B. Freeman. Welcome to a 5th anniversary retrospective. My name is Chris Spangle, and I'm the head of podcasting at IBJ. And this episode is brought to you by Equity 1821. Here on the Freedom Forum, the goal is to give Indiana's business community an honest place to examine race, gender, equity, and inclusion through the decisions leaders make. Who gets hired, promoted, mentored, trusted, contracted with, and invited into the room. Listening back across 5 years, one image keeps returning, and it's a door. Sometimes the door is a classroom, a job interview, or a board seat. Sometimes it's a second chance, a trusted mentor, or a workplace where someone can finally bring a full and authentic self. And once that door opens, the measure of leadership is whether a person walks through alone or turns around and holds it open for someone else. That is the story we will follow over the next hour, beginning with the interview that started it all. 5 years ago, Angela B. Freeman sat down for an interview on the IBJ podcast with Mason King. It was June of 2020, and companies across the country were making statements about race and asking what came next. And Angela offered a challenge. Do not point to the success of a few people as proof that barriers have disappeared. Listen to the whole story, what they overcame, who invested in them, and which doors were still closed. And that conversation became the seed of this podcast. We begin with Mason asking Angela a question.
You're an attorney. So I am going to hit you right off the bat with the devil's advocate question. You are a Black woman who has been very successful in two professions. You were a molecular biologist for Eli Lilly and Company for 12 years. You earned a law degree and became an intellectual property and patent attorney for Barnes & Thornburg, one of the biggest law firms in Indianapolis. What do you say to someone who wants to point to your success as evidence that there is no sexism or racism in STEM professions or in corporate America?
Well, yeah, so I will say I've had a absolutely beautiful and fulfilling and even upwardly mobile STEM and legal career. That's for sure. Here, all within the state of Indiana. But I must state that even within those fields, I think that I'm more the exception than the rule. With all the success that I have garnered, if you can consider that I've garnered success, I represent so many other women and people of color who don't share my same story, or who also are successful, no question, but you don't hear all the challenges and obstacles and barriers that they had to overcome to get to those levels of success and fulfillment. And I think oftentimes those obstacles and barriers are ones that majority men and women simply don't face. We know we're going to face obstacles and barriers. And at least for my family, they kind of raised me that that's no excuse. You still be successful. You still overcome. And we're preparing you to be ready for whatever obstacles and barriers that you may face. So the fact that there are successful women and people of color certainly should not be the example that systemic racism and bias don't exist. Those are just people who have managed, typically through a great support system, through people who have supported them, invested them, mentored them, have been able to overcome those systemic obstacles and barriers that absolutely exist.
Where do we typically see the silos of discrimination, sexism and racism, in the STEM fields?
I don't know if I truly buy into the fact that there are silos. I really do believe that systemic racism is real, that is kind of baked into all of our systems in this country. And I know people don't want to hear that, and they don't like to hear that. And that's viewed as some kind of disparagement of the country. It's not. It's factual. It's just what it is. And I think the sooner that we as a country and a nation, and particularly leaders, accept that and move past it and say, okay, what can we do at this point to make things more fair and equitable? I think that will get us beyond that. And racism is a strong word. I know people, shudder at the thought. I don't know that all people are always necessarily racist, but I do believe there are some true biases. And many of them, while unconscious, we talk a lot about implicit bias or unconscious bias. But I think that gives a lot of credit to people who are absolutely exhibiting conscious bias. They know exactly what they think. They know exactly where those thoughts come from. And they are in a position of privilege or power to instill that, inflect that on people that, they report to them or they supervise. And that is different than someone who truly is unaware and doesn't appreciate that some of their views may be stoked in bias that they don't appreciate or are knowledgeable of. So my point is, when we talk about racism, I think that is along the gamut of conscious bias. When someone is consciously biased, they know you're qualified. They know you can do the job. They know that you are credible. But because you come in a particular package, you're a particular gender, you're a particular race or ethnicity, you're LGBTQ, whatever the bias is, in their mind, you're just not qualified. That's racism. That's prejudice. That is absolutely built into most companies, systems, institutions in this country. And then the silos, I think, are those that are areas or industries where there has just been historically fewer people of color or women to really penetrate those industries. Science, technology, engineering, and math, and then the legal field, unquestionably, are industries that have just historically not been open to women and people of color. And so the longer that women and people of color kind of been shut out, the more those industries have been able to perpetuate bias and prejudice and racism in whatever forms that have been acceptable for them to be present. So certainly, 20 and 30 years ago, law firms were less diverse than they are today. I'm an example truly of being, particularly not just being in a big law firm, but being in intellectual property, which is a very specialized and niche area of the legal field. And I recognize that I sit in spaces and places where there are not a lot of people who look like me. But I think the more that women and people of color are put in a position to show that they can be valuable and be experts in those fields, it begins to open up doors for more diversity.
The conversation established what would become the Freedom Forum's method. Begin with lived experience, name the barrier plainly, and then ask leaders to change the systems around it. In January of 2023, Jimmie McMillian turned the microphone around and interviewed Angela on her own show. Before they discussed the podcast itself, he pressed her on the source of the drive that had carried her from Berea, Kentucky, to science, law, and leadership.
You have to understand how mind-blowing it is, even for me, to hear that you came from Berea and you've gone to these places, and you do make it sound so easy and simple, with the exception of the C, you got organic chemistry twice. You make it sound so easy and simple to come from Berea and then to end up at Eli Lilly for 15 years. Speak to the person who's listening to you and going, she's just some exceptional genius. No. Like she she just must be some gifted person. What inspires you? You had to have some bad times. You had to have some struggles. I mean, you make it sound easy, but what motivates you or motivated you to achieve at such a high level, to even in high school lead these things and be in charge of things and be the valedictorian? It seems like success. What motivated you to be that?
You know, I was blessed enough to have a mother who truly believed I was special. Like, she has told me that my whole life. Angela, you're special. God's got something awesome planned for you. Just keep striving, keep working hard. And so I believe that. I mean, I believe that, you know, there was something special out there for me. I didn't know what it was. I didn't even have a clue until I passed the bar exam and was like, okay, now I believe that there's something special for me. But I just never knew what that was. But I was smart, number one. So blessed to be smart, that's for sure. But outgoing, always enjoyed people, loved talking to people, loved learning from people, learning things that I didn't know. And so I've always been able to build relationships with people and learn from them and learn what opportunities are available. When you don't know yourself, you got to talk to folks who know more than you. And another thing I will say to my credit is I'm not scared of working hard. I don't mind to work hard. Like, I've told people my whole life, when you don't have a pedigree, when you don't have a profile, when you don't have people in high places that you can call and say, yeah, call them and they'll tell you about Angela, the only thing you have is the ability to show and prove. And that's by working hard. So I've been, you know, an advocate for hard work. Like, I see hard work in people now, and I'm still impressed. And I have a good friend who told me when we were working on some board service together that, Angela, you expect that everybody works like you. That's not the case. You're a rarity. And I think as I've had more experience in my life, I've learned that, yeah, I think my work ethic is absolutely a characteristic that a lot of folks don't have.
Later in that same conversation, Jimmie asked about the door that became the Freedom Forum itself, and what Angela wanted to happen when guests trusted her with the truth.
You know, the biggest sign of, you know, your belief that it's not all about you and that positive presence is your creation of the Freedom Forum. And this podcast where you've interviewed the real leaders of Indianapolis and Indiana and displayed their stories. And I'm certainly grateful to have been one of the beneficiaries of that. What led you to create this Freedom Forum? And what has it meant to you as you've been able to hear the stories and engage with people and display those stories for other people around the world?
Yeah. So I appreciate that. I should first say I did not create the Freedom Forum. The Freedom Forum, this podcast, was really developed as a collaboration. It was the brainchild of IBJ. Nate Feldman, the CEO, and Leslie Weindebenner, the editor, came to me and said, hey, we had this idea about a podcast for the IBJ that is focused around diversity. In 2020, during COVID, I had done a podcast interview with the IBJ. Mason King interviewed me, and they had heard that interview and said, we heard that interview, and we think you'd be the perfect host for this podcast. And I thought, once again, see how God works? Like, I mean, seriously, I couldn't come up with that in a million years. I asked them, like, are you serious? Because for me, it was just the biggest blessing. It had come right after I had finished my stint with Women in High Tech, and I couldn't have imagined anything better that would have fed my passions the way this does. So I was like, absolutely, I'm all about it. And I also appreciated the opportunity that they gave me, kind of some freedom to interview folks that I knew had real stories like yourself around diversity, around the challenges that you've experienced, where you've been. And I wanted to tell those real stories, not just the, you know, boilerplate diversity MLK language, but real talk about. And so that's why we named it the Freedom Forum, so that, you know, my guests felt like they had the freedom to come on here and talk really about some of their challenging experiences, some of the stuff that many of us have kept to ourselves. I mean, there's so many stories of, challenge and neglect and just getting treated poorly here in this state that we keep to ourselves, or we tell each other in very private relationships, but people don't know that. And part of it is we're scared of repercussions. We're scared of the backlash. We're scared. But the truth is the truth. I mean, and what they say, you can't handle the truth, right? But I wanted people, because when you put a face on things, when you hear the ugly, nasty truth, and you have a face to associate with it, and you see these people in a point of power and position. I'm not talking to folks who are still in that muck and mire, because we've all been there. You've now transcended. You've looked back. You've learned the lessons and can give that to somebody else. That's the folks I want to talk to, because you do now have the opportunity to help somebody else through your challenges. And those are the things I wanted to talk about. And that's what we try to do here.
Part of the Freedom Forum is real stories and real talk with lessons carried forward in each one of these careers. That mission is especially clear in the relationship between Angela and Jimmie. Before either one sat behind a podcast microphone, Jimmie had identified Angela as a legal talent while she was in law school. Their relationship is living proof of the kind of mentorship both of them advocate. When Angela invited Jimmie into the guest chair in 2022, his own story showed why a resume can never capture the whole person, and why opportunity often begins with someone willing to look again.
I bet you never thought this is where we'd end up when you found me all those years ago. I want to start by you telling our listeners a bit about some things they couldn't know about you by looking you up on online or social media. Tell us what contributed to you becoming an attorney and a motorcycle enthusiast.
Well, thank you, Angela, for the opportunity to speak to you today. I think I want to start first with, in fact, being here today with you is actually something I did anticipate and something that I did know was going to happen. I think it's important to point out that when our relationship developed, you were already an all-star at Eli Lilly. You had gone to law school, but I think the nature of our relationship and the reason why I'm so grateful for it is because it validates what I think we both hope to see, and that is mentors investing their time in the mentees, identifying people proactively, using all of their resources, knowledge, and skill to help them within this community so that they can develop into somebody that helps others. It's planting a seed and then watching that tree grow and become the beautiful person that you are today that is pouring into so many other people. And that is why I'm here today. I think it's the background of my story, and it's the roots of the tree of where I came from. I'm from the south side of Chicago, grew up in an area called the Wild Hundreds. Went to a public school called Morgan Park. My mother was a teacher. She taught special education for over 30 years. My father never worked. We grew up very modest means, if not anything at all. And my mom instilled some very good lessons to me about education was the way to get out. I grew up in an area that was infested with gangs, two big major gangs, folks and vice lords, and my mother tried to keep me alive through all of that. I actually ended up at 15 years old, I was in a drive-by shooting where my best friend was shot in the head. And at that time, I came home. My mother said, you can graduate and go to college early if you get the grades. So I ended up going to college at 16. Shortly after that, my father, who had been abusive to me and my mother throughout our life, we had been on the run back and forth to different places throughout my life. While I was in college, he tried to shoot me in the dorm. I hid out in Detroit, Michigan, where then my brother, who was 9 years older than me and went to Indiana University, came and got me at IU with nothing but the clothes on my back, helped me enroll in the IU, and then 3 months later, my father shot my mother 3 times. And so then I subsequently flunked out of school and went from being this academic all-star in high school to a college dropout in a short period of time, about 2-3 years. At that time, I worked at Best Buy, Firestone, worked at little odd jobs here and there, and, was glad that my mother survived the shooting, but she stayed with my father and had promised God if she lived, I would get back in school. And so I took independent study classes to get my associate's degree, and from there, got my associate's degree getting straight A's in those classes, wasn't allowed to go to classroom, and then finally was able to get back in school where I got straight A's and B's my first year back and straight A's my second year back. Even with that, my GPA was a 2.4, when I graduated from IU and I still wanted to go to law school, people told me that wouldn't be possible because my GPA was so bad. I tell kids, if you don't remember anything else from this story, remember this. Nobody can tell you no who doesn't make the decision. You still need to try. So I applied to 9 law schools, got accepted to 7, and ended up going to IU McKinney. And the rest is what we'll talk about, I'm sure, but did extremely well in law school, ended up working for Kiefer McGough, and then later on for Justice Frank Sullivan on the Indiana Supreme Court as his law clerk. He became like a father to me, and then went on to Barnes & Thornburg 2 years later, where I became a partner. And then on May 2nd, 2016, joined the greatest spectacle in racing and the greatest team in late racing at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway as senior corporate counsel. And then in 2020, after George Floyd's murder, Roger Penske named me to be chief diversity officer in addition to senior corporate counsel. And so I have 2 full-time jobs. So that kind of brings you up to speed to here in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, I mean, that's why I always love talking to you. Now, I know some of that story, but I didn't even know all of that story. And so I appreciate you sharing that because I think it shows, I mean, you and I are both examples of, in writing, we may not be the most spectacular, we're not going to necessarily knock you off your feet on paper, but when you get to know us or you give us an opportunity, we'll always show up. And I think that that speaks a lot to some of the traditional parameters people are still being held account to that really doesn't reflect all the things they've truly been through. I think grit is a real thing, and it really accounts for a whole lot of things that you can't necessarily quantify on a piece of paper.
Jimmie's story turns mentorship from a slogan into a set of actions. See the person, not only the paper, make the introduction, lend your credibility, and keep investing long enough for the seed to grow. At Cook Group and Cook Medical, President Pete Yonkman described what the same principle can look like at an organizational scale. A manufacturing project at 38th and Sheridan in Indianapolis was not treated as a building placed in a neighborhood. It became a chance to build with the neighborhood and to create opportunity at every stage.
So for those who don't know the background, Cook Medical decided that they were going to build a $15 million medical device manufacturing facility in Indianapolis in the 38th and Sheridan Avenue area, so the northeast side of Indianapolis. And in doing so, partnered with not only diverse suppliers and vendors, such as what Akilah represented, but also the community to make sure that as you were doing this project, you got the considerations of the community involved. Tell us how you came to that, how Cook decided to partner not only with, Akilah and her team, but Goodwill and the opportunities that have culminated from there. And then give us an update on the project, how's the community doing, how's the facility doing?
Yeah, it's been terrific. First of all, Akilah is awesome. I know how we kind of got connected to her, and boy, she was just a godsend for that project because we set out a goal. We set out a goal that people said we couldn't do, which we wanted 100% minority participation in that project. And that came from a conversation I had with the community, with our neighbors. And they said, this is great. We're excited about the jobs, but hey, when you start building this thing, if there's a bunch of white guys building the building, it's going to send a message to us that it's not really for us. Fair enough. Okay. So let's try and work on that. And so we started thinking, could we do this? People said no. And then we met Akilah and she said, well, yeah, we can do that. Sure, we can. He's got to try. And we did. And she made that happen. And I think something like 60 new people came into the construction industry who'd never been in before and had construction certifications now. So, it's just, those construction projects, again, are another opportunity. If you're going to do them, you can also do them in a way that's a little intentional to help local communities and help people get into jobs they may not have had before. Just think about it a little bit different. So that was exciting. The project really came from the discussion around George Floyd's murder, which was, what can we do to be active? What can we do to do something that's constructive? And we had this opportunity. We had a need for expansion of our capacity. And we thought, well, we can build them anywhere in the world, really. Why not choose a community that has seen opportunity just go away over the years, right? And that we went and talked to a lot of communities in Indianapolis. We met Ashley Gervitz, who runs a community development corporation up there. And I met with a lot of community development corporations. I met with a lot of people. The thing that she did was different. A lot of people came in and said, hey, there's tax incentives, there's this, there's that. she really didn't say any of that. She just said, come meet the people. You have to meet these people. That was interesting. And so we did. And we're like, wow, this community is incredibly connected, passionate. It's nothing like what you hear on the news. It's not the news clips that you see. And that was the important part was, boy, there, because we can't do it alone, right? If we're going to do this to be successful, you need partners. And so many people stepped up. So that was how we got there. And, I've been so appreciative. I've met so many great people now that it's really changed my view. I guess if you told me about 38th and Sheridan, and what you hear is it's got high crime rate and high rate of poverty and all these challenges, but that's not really what I see at all. I see a very active community that wants to succeed.
That's just so inspiring. And I appreciate that you all, I think what I heard out of all that was intentionality. You were intentional about it and made it happen. And I think that is necessary because certainly, if you think about some of the places we all need to be as corporations with regard to DE&I, it always seems impossible, right? We're so far from where we'd like to be, where we should be, that the avenue to get there just seems impossible. But, it is about finding the right partners who share the same values and passions that can inch you closer to where you're trying to be. So I'm so thankful that, Akilah was there, that you all found each other and made that happen, because she has really just claimed her name with regard to that whole project and really making it happen. And it is so impressive to me to finally meet you and the company behind it that really had the intentionality to say, you know what, we can do this and we're going to do it. I think that's awesome. And an exceptional example of what can be done when organizational leaders just decide we're going to do it.
Yeah, when you make that decision, right? If you say we're going to make 100%, all of a sudden, if we hadn't made that goal, we would have never met Akilah, right? But all of a sudden, you create this need or for yourself, I guess, in some way, this goal, and you start meeting new people. We also partnered with Goodwill, who, most people think about as retail, but they really are. They're retail for sure, but they do manufacturing. I think they have 4,500 adults in adult high schools throughout the state. There's a tremendous organization and affecting people's lives all over the state. And they provide these wraparound services for folks. And I want to give you a story. So the manufacturing facility is up and running, and we're making product now that's saving people's lives. We didn't come up with this, but the team there came up with it. They have this mantra of they save 2 lives with every product. They save the patient's life and the person that's making it. They save their life too. And so what's interesting about that is that we had a group in for a tour, and some of the people were sharing their stories. And one of the employees shared that he'd been in prison for 30 years of his life, that he just got his ankle bracelet off last month. And it was the first time in 30 years that he had been free. And he attributed it to finally somebody gave me an opportunity in a job that would work with me. That he had to take credit for himself. He admitted he made some mistakes, but this was an environment now that somebody believed in him and gave him the opportunity. And so he said, I'm free for the first time in 30 years. That's the idea, right? I mean, I suppose we could have made this manufacturing plant, like companies, you could have put it anywhere in the world, but how many of those places are going to have the impact that had on that person? That's the idea, right? So you can do these things. We talk about it. You can do good business, but you can also do good in the community. And that's true. You can do those things at the same time. It doesn't have to be philanthropy. It doesn't have to be sort of off to the side.
Yeah, that's just phenomenal. I mean, and the amount of impact, I'll say again, with both of those programs, the My Cook Pathway program and this project, Cook and all their partners have literally, changed lives. It is not just a matter of giving a job, but it is literally changing the trajectory of lives and the families that are intertwined with the lives of your workers, of the vendors, of the construction workers. It all trickles down and elevates everyone involved. So that's just really exceptional. And I appreciate, again, you sharing those examples, because I think so often corporate leaders, sit around and try to brainstorm on what program can we do and what can we invent and what can we make up. And they're never going to get as granular or as impactful as what you've done with both of these programs. And a lot of times it's because they're sitting in a beautiful air-conditioned boardroom that will never see some of the real issues that are happening outside of their million-dollar buildings to really understand how to address real problems. So thank you for that. I think that's really amazing.
Yeah.
Coming up, Juan Gonzalez on accepting an invitation and widening it. Kristin Weeden on the cost of bringing your whole self to work. Kaye Vitug on creating a safe space to fail. And Mario Rodriguez on the collective wisdom behind an enduring culture. Now, it's time for a break.
Every business has potential, but when it comes to getting a loan and building business credit, many people aren't sure where to start or who to trust.
If you feel the same way, try Equity 1821. They will walk you through the entire lending process, and not to just help you build business credit, it will help expand, hire, and grow your business in ways you didn't think were possible.
Equity 1821 is here to empower local business owners. Visit equity1821.org and take the next step toward financial empowerment. Equity 1821, building community, one entrepreneur at a time.
We're back with this 5th anniversary retrospective of IBJ's The Freedom Forum with Angela B. Freeman. I'm your host, Chris Spangle. A door can open for complicated reasons. Juan Gonzalez, president of KeyBank Central Indiana Market, told Angela that being chosen for representation is not a reason to shrink from an opportunity. It is a chance to contribute, to prove the choice, and to make the representation ordinary.
Then mentoring. We have something called Mentor Me at the company. I know every company tries to do something like that. And it's a formal mentoring program that works two ways. One, you can choose who do you want to be mentored by. So like people sign up. It doesn't have to be from the same kind of line of business, not the same location. So I might be mentoring somebody in Denver or vice versa, right? So it's pretty cool because you get to meet people from different backgrounds and different areas. So we're really trying to do that as a company. And I believe most companies are trying to do something similar. In some cases, better than others. So we're trying to learn as we go. And the final thing that companies are doing, I think, or could do to be better is to try to create these employee programs to do educational development and leadership development for that young leader that is identified to be a young leader. And we've been very, 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 very intentional about finding those minority employees that are very successful on their jobs, right? You got to be successful at your job. That's a given.
Right.
You and I have been doing this for a long time. We know that comes with the territory, you will. But picking those people so they can give the opportunity to them to senior management, to the Harvard School, to all these programs that will advance your career to be the next level of executive that we need so we can continue this process. So those three will be very helpful. Just to answer the last question. The first two that you ask about challenges, I'll tell you, I've been very fortunate in many ways, but the reality is I'm a Latino. I don't look like everyone else, and I have a very strong accent. So, it wasn't easy, but this community allows you to raise your hand and say, I want to be part of this. They let you come in and then see what you do, right? Like you got to show that you had the talent to do it. Right. But one thing that has been fascinating for me is that a lot of people join some of these boards and all that, but they don't talk or they don't participate or they don't ask questions. They don't challenge the process. So it's like, why are you joining this if you don't have any thoughts? And if you don't become part of that participation, then you just check on the box. And so I tell people all the time, but join it, but make sure that you have ideas. Make sure that you join it because you're passionate about it. So that's been working very well for me. And then the final question, this is a long process. So for me, it's been, and I get emotional sometimes about this, you got to raise your hand. And it's okay that they chose you because you're Latino. That doesn't mean anything. It's an opportunity, So open the door and take it. Run with it. So I get emotional because some people get offended by that. Like, why are you offended by that?
Yeah.
It's a great opportunity. Take it. Because in 10 years, it might not be there.
Yeah.
So again, just to answer your question.
No, I agree. And I want to talk about that because, I recognize, and we just talked about, and everybody knows, there are challenges in being diverse in a non-diverse business. But to your point, you just kind of implied it, and I want to talk more about it. I really subscribe to the notion that there is often power and purpose when you are the only one or one of few. It's exactly what you're talking about, such as being a diverse business leader in an environment or a community or a corporation that there are not a lot of diverse people. So you are correct that, many people see that as, oh, I was chosen because I'm Black, or I'm chosen because I'm a woman, or I'm chosen because I'm Latino. But if you're good at what you do, take that as an opportunity to show up and show out, right? And so at least that's how I subscribe to that. So describe for me, if you agree, some of the benefits and or advantages that you believe contribute to a diverse business leader like yourself and myself being able to successfully build a thriving career in a Midwest city like Indianapolis or a state like Indiana, where we know is not overly diverse, but yet we've still been able to be successful, and we are representative of so many more of us out there. In particular, what unique qualities or characteristics or even skills do you think that you possess that have empowered your career success to date, despite your diverse background?
No, 100%, Angela. So the fact that that there is very few of us. I mean, we used to joke with three other people that you know very well. Rafael Sanchez, the lawyer, of course, not the reporter. Charlie Garcia, Charlie in construction, and Dr. Lopez, but at that point when we started our careers and all of that, we were very few Latinos in positions that they could like, hey, we need a Latino at this board, and we need another board. And so we would call each other and, hey, what board are you going to be this year? So I can be on the other one, so we could have a little bit of representation in the community. Now, we knew that at the time, there was two things corporate America was doing, or the board, trying to have a Latino on their board just to,
make sure they say that.
Right?
Yeah.
And then I truly believe that they wanted to learn a little bit about that community, right? Like they were curious enough to see, hey, we're seeing more Latinos coming up. Maybe you can help us understand what that means.
Sure.
So when I say, hey, when the opportunity opens up, take it. Forget that you're the only Latino. Just you imply earlier, like jump on it, showcase your qualities, and then make sure that they understand that we're that good,
right.
So they can invite some more people in. Do the right thing. Open the doors for others. So and now you see that there are leadership programs specifically to Latino professionals now that are helping us develop that talent of people to be on different boards, different committees, different commissions. So we can expand this because it cannot be just 2 or 3 people. It needs to be hundreds.
Right.
And then it becomes part of the of this community.
In 2024, Kristin Weeden, Chief Talent Officer at Penske, brought the question of how to open up more opportunity for others inside the workplace to her company. As an undergraduate working with a men's basketball program, she learned how much energy women can spend simply defending the right to do their work. Years later, even a hairstyle became a test of whether a workplace would accept the whole person.
Let me share this. So my first involvement in the world of sport was actually in undergrad, and I worked for our men's basketball program. So I started out being like a team manager, right? And that kind of evolved into other ways that I was able to support our head coach, and I'm looking at the travel schedule and just contracts and all kinds of things, which was a great opportunity. It was my first lesson in some of the challenges that might arise when you put a group of men and a young lady in a space together, traveling and hotels and practices and locker rooms and
all that comes with it. And I'm
going to tell you, it was not an easy experience. It really forced me to understand what my boundaries are. And then after you know what those are, once you decide what those are, how do you enforce them?
Yeah, express it to
How do you make sure that it's clear what my boundaries are? And how do you do that with people in authority?
Yes, absolutely.
So that was a really hard thing. And then I went on to also be graduate assistant men's basketball at Indiana State. And so we was able to carry those skills and just mindset into that experience too. But I will be honest and say graduating and seeking opportunities in sport did at that time kind of transition from looking for opportunities with sports teams to more corporate opportunities, which is why I ended up at the NCAA, right? It wasn't team facing and player facing and all that, because it was exhausting. The microaggressions as it relates to sexual interests and, you know, just all of those things it was overwhelming. It was exhausting. I'm a vocal woman and I don't have a problem expressing myself, but it's tired. It's exhausting when you want to show up to work and do a good thing and exemplify, you know, show your skills and show the value that you can add. But we focused on other things. Yeah. It's too much. So I did have this mindset of being over it, which was unfortunate. And I do remember going through a period of like being sad that what I was excited to get out into the workforce and experience just wasn't going to happen, because I was not wanting to just deal with that every day, all day. And it's funny because as I fast forward and became a dean at UND, one of my core responsibilities became oversight of our Title IX as it relates to student conduct and sexual assault awareness and harassment. I was a decision maker in, you know, cases involving sexual assault and harassment allegations. And so that was all interesting because I had come from experiencing a lot of that. When we come full circle and now I've got this opportunity to come back in sport, I did think about, like, is the landscape different? What will the challenges be? I didn't let it hold me back. I stepped right into it. I was super excited. My experiences over the course of my career have done more to serve me in terms of I've continued to grow, to understand who I am, what my authenticity looks like, what my boundaries are, how do I appropriately manage that in the workplace, how do I add value and be cool and chill and a part of the team and all of that. So I think my career journey has prepared me for the level that I'm at. I will say gratefully, I haven't personally experienced those things at this level, which I'm incredibly grateful for. It doesn't mean that it doesn't still exist out there. So I'm always sensitive to being a sounding board and coach for women who might be experiencing some of those types of aggressions in the workplace. I think what continues and what persists and what I have continued to experience over my career journey has more to do with the differences in how we perceive things like executive presence as it relates to women of color or people of color. How do we define that? What are we talking about? Can I be comfortable wearing my braids and my hoop earrings, and my fashion is a lot different than many other people that I share space with? And just some of the worry that I think we might have, in my view, unnecessarily, when we show up to the workplace that some of our counterparts don't necessarily ever have to think about. We were having a conversation about this the other day, and I was saying part of the problem when we talk about certain things as it relates to people of color, when we're talking about how people show up, presence, and just all kinds of things, we sometimes don't see those same things in our white counterparts. So we're talking about it when it comes to the people of color, but someone who's not of color might come to work with their hair all over their head, and we're not in an uproar about it. Right. We don't even notice it because it's not different than what we're used to. But we're so different than what they're used to that everything just seems heightened. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
It's constant conversation around how can we make sure that people can come to work every day and be themselves and add value and not be self-conscious and worried. I remember when I interviewed for my job at the bank, what I knew about the organization was that it was a bank, which my perception is pretty buttoned up, very conservative. And I had micro braids at the time. And I was panicking, and I was like, oh my, and I had just gotten them in. And I think, if you got somebody, like, it takes some hours to get the braids in. And so I was panicking. I was like, should I take them out? And I'm like, I'm going to spend, I don't know how many hours taking these doggone braids out that I just got in for this interview. And I ended up not taking them out because I said, you know what? This is my summer hair. When I go on vacation, this is what I like. This is what works for me. And I'm going to get some next summer. And if I'm working there, they need to know that. So I'm going to keep these braids in. I mean, it took me a few hours to get there. I was like, no, I'm going to keep these braids in. And if that's a deal breaker, then that's a space that I don't need to be in.
That's right.
Because that means I can't bring my full self. That means that I have to keep part of me at home. And it's a pretty important part. My hair is important to me. The way I look is important to me. And when I go on vacation, having a hairstyle that I can manage is important to me. So we going to wear these braids and we going to interview and we going to get this job, or we not, and that's going to be okay. And gratefully, I got the job. But these are the things that I feel like some of our, just being honest, white counterparts may not have to concern themselves. Maybe they do. I've not heard those stories. And so, we have a lot of conversation about how we can help manage that as an employer and make sure that people can come to work and be themselves. I remember having a conversation with Mark. I report to Mark Miles, our president CEO. And I don't know, it was some months in to me starting the role. I don't remember how it came up, but I said that I felt good about being there and I felt like I could be myself. And he was like, you do? Like, you feel like you can, show up and be yourself? I said, I do. And I appreciated the interaction because what I felt like was he was happy that I was having that experience because that was what he wanted for me and for others. And so it starts at the top with understanding that everybody doesn't know everything about everything, but all of us have a seat at the table to have the conversation and to try to create safe spaces for everybody.
In 2025, Kaye Vitug, Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer of Roche Diagnostics Corporation, remembered the first manager who saw her potential when she could not see it yet herself. The advice was simple. Just go for it. What made that permission powerful was the room to make mistakes and the knowledge that someone still had her back.
You mentioned a woman earlier, Miss Lee, who was a mentor to you. And I'd like to ask you, what is one of the best pieces of mentoring advice that you've received? And how do you approach mentoring, particularly of diverse talent, who, as I've talked about with you and I, may not have all the tools or the opportunities or see all the necessary steps to get to any real opportunity? How do you help mentor folks who often don't have all the tools or qualifications or a linear path to where they're trying to go?
Yeah. I think thank you for bringing up Mrs. Lee, Marjorie Lee. I think her advice was just go for it, Kaye. I think I first shared with you that was my first job out of college. And I came back to the States after graduating from the Philippines. So I was lost. I didn't know how to act in a corporate environment, but at the same time being that first job. So she keeps on telling me, I remember it very fondly, just go for it. Like that really helped build the confidence in me, knowing that even if I go for it, and I made some mistakes and I failed a couple of times in certain projects that we had, she was there to, one, coach me, but at the same time create a safe space for me. So I really felt that I had free space and safe space to one, try to be who I am, and at the same time, just go for certain things that I wouldn't have imagined to be able to be doing right from the very beginning of my career at Delta Dental. So that really, one, stayed with me, that the limitation sometimes that we put on ourselves is really just in our minds most often. And if I get around that, or if I get over that because of others telling me that, hey, you can, and you have the potential, or you can do this, it really brought me tons of confidence. So, and, when I start to a relationship with mentees, that is basically the first thing that I recognize, is that a lot of us really just want to have an understanding of the space that we can roam in, and being able to have the ability to continue to try and have someone at their back and say, yeah, go ahead, and give them permission. So I think that was the biggest learning for me that I took from my very first mentor, professional mentor. I think the other things now that I see or within the programs that we have, and we have formalized mentors and mentees, a lot of what I see is still very much true to when I started my career 20 years ago. I think we've progressed in terms of really understanding how diverse perspectives, different skills that people bring, different experiences are really critical for us to be able to deliver much more better outcomes, but at the same time, understanding the humanity in each of us. I think one of the critical things that I've started to put together within the organizations that I've led is actually much more a mentorship relationship, but more of a coaching infrastructure. And that actually turns into a very different capacity building, because a mentor usually tells you what to do based on their experiences or provides some guidance based on their previous experiences. And as a coach, actually, you're able to really open up the space for others to think about the solutions themselves. And that has been something that we've instituted in the organization that I have, where you actually, yes, you can have access to mentors, but at the same time, you also have access to coaches where you are in a relationship or a partnership that you are willing to be vulnerable, but at the same time explore the possibilities that you actually know the solution deep down within you. Because our the superpowers that we usually have are just hidden and locked, and the ability to, one, be self-aware, to kind of dig deeper and at the same time explore that with a coach has been a really great shift in terms of what I see the needs are for individuals within our organization now. Yes, mentors, sponsors are still really critical, but at the same time, the coaching capabilities and skills have been a tremendous, I think, unlocking for the potential for our people as well.
Yeah, I love the fact that you focused on coaching, because I don't think on this program in particular we have enough. We've talked a lot about mentorship and sponsorship. Coaching is absolutely another prong of that. And so that's amazing. I also really resonate with you talking about Mrs. Lee and how she saw potential in you that you didn't recognize yourself, but also gave you free space to fail and still be okay. And I think as I speak to so many of our diverse leaders or diverse emerging leaders or, young folks who are looking to become leaders, that is a challenge. They don't feel like they're in spaces where they can make a mistake and still be okay. So having that coverage of Mrs. Lee, and we all have our people, right? I have several myself who have covered me when I made a mistake or came up short and said, it's okay. This is part of the learning as well, right? You'll do better next time. And just like I know, you never learn a lesson as well as when you fail or mess up, right? Those are the lessons you definitely learn. Like that will never happen again, right?
You know that feeling when your stomach just falls?
That's right. That's right.
Like, yeah, that feeling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Those are the things that make you say, okay, I've learned this lesson. You don't have to worry about me doing that. But my point here is simply that I think that is so powerful and is particularly necessary. I think many leaders, no matter your, diverse perspective, have had those people. But I particularly think diverse leaders have had someone who you at least felt like took a chance on you, gave you some space, gave you some room, covered you, appreciating that they're not going to get it all right. And I think that does help make us better leaders as we get more senior, because you do remember the Mrs. Lees. You remember the folks who took a chance on you, and you appreciate, I also have to take a few chances on some emerging leaders who may not check every single box, but I see their potential and I see their grit and I see their humility, and I am going to roll the dice and take a chance on them like someone did to me. And I think that's where the mentorship and the sponsorship and the coaching all kind of play the full circle, because you then get an opportunity to do for someone else what someone did for you.
Yeah, and I think as leaders, our role, I take this as one of my key roles, is to develop other leaders. And I think that is a key measure of how successful you are, is how many leaders you've built and have inspired and influenced across the organization. So it's easy, I think, to be a boss because you could tell people what to do and, deliver things. But actually, it's harder to be a true leader that actually creates that one stewardship, but at the same time followership in how you create leaders as well throughout the organization. So I think that those are, my reflections as well in terms of what skills and roles of leaders that we should all be really taking seriously and not just delivering what is stated, like you said, in the job description or in the role that you have. It's really how you build that community of leaders around you as well.
Mentorship can open a door. Coaching helps people recognize that they can open doors themselves. Leadership builds a community capable of opening them for others. And that brings us to the most recent conversation in this retrospective here in 2026. When Angela asked Mario Rodriguez, Executive Director and CEO of the Indianapolis Airport Authority, about the airport's success, he didn't begin with rankings, runways, or buildings. He began with people, and with the collective wisdom that becomes possible when different experiences are genuinely heard.
I recall reading an article where you quoted a conversation you had, and you gave a quote about, and a shout out, just like you did here, appreciation to your team. I want to know, what do you believe has been one of the greatest lessons you've learned about yourself as a leader of people and teams? And what specific skills or strengths do you think you bring to the corporate environment that really allows you to manage teams and people in a well and effective way?
That is an incredibly good question. But one of the things I have to say is that I think Plato said this, if I'm not mistaken. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not in the wrong room. Why we do this and why we're so good is that we have collective wisdom. If you believe that any single leader is the smartest person in the room, that the leader probably should be in the room, right? It takes collective wisdom because we all have different life experiences.
Right.
My team is made up, and it's right. It's the right thing to do, and it's also the smart thing to do. My team is composed of different people with different life experiences. The exec team, the whole airport is incredibly different. We don't win awards in spite of it. We win awards because of it. And that's just a byproduct of what we do. But 50% of my executive staff are women. We have everybody that has different life experiences. That's why we have great ideas. We're very innovative. We could pivot rather quickly because you have this composite group that's bringing in ideas, not just one idea like you see in most other places that you have this, like, call it in sort of like uniformity of thought, right? That everybody thinks the same way. So you're going to get the same answer all the time. Whether it's right or wrong, you're going to get the same answer. In our team, everybody's allowed to speak. Yeah, I kind of drill, and it may sound a little bit different, but I kind of drill 3 things into the team. That the 3 paths to wisdom: I don't know, I need help, and I made a mistake. And I think everybody in the team basically embraces that and embraces what we're trying to do here. If you look at all the awards we won, those are byproducts, right?
Sure.
But many years ago, I did a study comparing American corporations to Japanese corporations. And it was just a personal study, a personal journey. American companies don't last. They don't last. You've got a couple of them, a handful of them, that are a couple of 100 years old. There's Japanese companies that are millennia old. There's like a contractor that used to build the castles for the shoguns. There's a mochi shop. And over again, what I found out is that their higher purpose was something other than profitability. So our higher purpose is to serve the community. Public value in the sense, right? Try to transfer everything. And if you look at what we've done, what this fabulous team has done, the previous year, not last year, or a couple of days into the year, 2024, this team, every dollar spent at the airport, 94% of it was spent here locally. So that takes a big effort from the team. That's over $211 million to the local community. So it's a very hard thing. And I mean, it's just a fabulous team experience, and they understand what they're here for. Their higher purpose is to make your life better.
That's awesome. I would take it from that response. That really is what you feel like one of your greatest accomplishments is as a leader, is being able to assemble this highly functional, collectively working together team that respects one another. I mean, that's half the battle. If you can do that, you won the war. I mean, would you say that that's one of the things you're most proud of?
Absolutely. And something else, they tolerate my idiosyncrasies, which is like amazing. So they kind of like, they haven't kicked me out yet. They haven't kicked me off the island. So I love that team, and they really are, they've got their heart in the right place, and they see it. I know when I got here, it was interesting that we started looking at the term public value. Well, what does that actually mean? It's very simple to put things, especially in the public context, to put things into dollars and cents, profits and loss. That's the easy part. That's really easy. But how do we actually transfer that value back to the community? So the whole team developed a strategic plan in-house for the only purpose of the strategic plan was to figure out what the higher purpose of the organization was. And they figured it out. And I mean, after that, it was off to the races. And you can see all the accolades. We won 8 J.D. Powers. That's 8 of them. I think we won more than BMW, which is like pretty cool. And we were named 14 years the best airport in North America, and I think we're going to win it again. I mean, it's just a fabulous monument to the team, or it's to the team as to what they've been able to build. And not the awards. The awards are just a byproduct, right?
Yeah.
It's what they've been able to do. During COVID, for example, we had enough reserve funds where we didn't release anybody. Everybody was kept on salary. The whole team is still there. And to such a degree that we've tweaked how we hire people to such an incredible degree that our attrition rate, our attrition rate is only 5%. The average in the nation is 11%. So people want to come work with us. People want to stay with us once they're there. And it's really a fabulous environment, a fabulous culture inside the organization.
Across 5 years of the Freedom Forum, Angela and her guests have returned to the same truths. Talent is not always visible on paper. Representation is only the beginning. And culture is built in daily decisions. Who is invited, who is heard, who is allowed to learn, and who receives another chance. Somewhere in each of these stories, someone opened a door. A mother, a brother, a mentor, a hiring manager, an executive team, or a community partner. Then the person who entered had a choice to keep moving. And that is the larger goal of Angela's work here on the Freedom Forum. Not to collect polished success stories, but to tell the whole story. The barriers, the help, the responsibility, and to give Indiana's leaders ideas they can act on. To Angela B. Freeman, to every guest who has trusted this forum, and to the listeners who have carried these conversations into workplaces and communities, thank you for 5 years. You can hear the full conversations featured in this episode and the entire Freedom Forum archive wherever you get your podcast and at ibj.com. Please come back next month for another conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Central Indiana business community. I'm Chris Spangle. Thank you for listening.